Hello. Yes, after a very long period of time, I am now prepared to resume the history of Halloween Horror Nights. This is the first video in my history for Halloween Horror Nights 19, ripped from the silver screen from the year 2009. Which, good heavens, that was 4 years ago? Good heavens, how time just flies by. Now, let me talk a little bit about a phenomena that has started to become more interesting as years go. The sort of phenomena of leaked information about Halloween Horror Nights. There are reasons, all sorts of reasons, why they have the whole security for information, and why that people are forced to sign non-disclosure statements, and why there's a lid kept on it officially, you see. A number of reasons. Especially if you have IP projects, intellectual property projects, you have a problem there because, you see, every single one of those IPs involve a numerous number of internecine, Byzantine contractual obligations and agreements between multiple entities. You see, because your intellectual property doesn't necessarily belong to just one corporate entity. There's different ones. You ever watch a movie, you notice how many different logos happen before the movie starts. The more logos you have, the more that property has people who own a piece of it. So if you want to license it, you're going to have to deal with each and every one of those and all of their different lawyers. It's a complicated quagmire of legalistic contractual bureaucracy. That's why sometimes you got the deal going, but you haven't secured every right yet, and maybe you're already building, say, an attraction, but you can't talk about it in the press until the final deal is signed and everything's clear, and then you can publicize it, you see. I'm not saying that happened this year, but some people might be wondering why something wasn't talked about until the 28th. Maybe something wasn't signed until the 27th. Well, maybe not that late, but there are reasons why something that you think would be a big selling point didn't get mentioned until later. It's just part of the game, you see. But, say you want to publicize stuff early because you know the fan, it builds excitement. So, how do you do that? Well, you leak information on the sly. Well, sometimes you do that deliberately. I'm not saying anybody's done that. Sometimes it just happens whether you want it to or not, and it gets out. So, 2008, I mentioned in my previous videos covering Reflections of Fear. In 2008, there was a huge leak that took everyone a bit by surprise. Information that had been in public record since the event began. Even back then they weren't even that concerned with that kind of security, but over the years no one ever bothered to go and look until a fellow named Chad did so in 2008 and discovered, oh my goodness, the names of all the houses are here on the actual permits. So in 2009 they said, well, you tricked us, you sneaky little devils. You found that out, didn't you? We're going to play. Because a law was being on the books, you see. A law was going on the books to prevent people from finding out too much information in the public record. This was the so-called Harry Potter law, but it also had to do with Disney. Because theme parks wanted to protect their secrets from each other. Not that it really matters that much, but they started working on that because too much info was getting out for major theme park attractions, and it was causing unfair, you know, I might have this attraction, and if you over here know about it at Disney or Universal about each other, you might make a real cheap copycat first, and That was part of the fear, you see. Uh, so, at that point in 2009, they still had to put something on the permits to have a name, so they put code words. Code words. It almost became a bit of a game. We can guess the code words and try to figure out what they mean. Gee, that sounds like someone's cryptic comment. Well, I sort of got the idea from that in some ways, to try to narrow down an idea to one word, or one phrase. That does kind of go back to the code words that were given out in those. But there's something else happened, of course. Way back before any of that, the first little bit of information came from none other than our show director at that time, James Michael Roddy, the show director at Halloween Horror Nights back in the day. Now he works for that other company with the mouse and the Goofy and the duck. So shows you how things can change. But back in the day, he gave out almost it was actually 2008, mind you, right after Halloween Horror Nights 18, Halloween Horror Nights 18 ended. Female icons, I got confused between the Luck and the Mary for a half a second, I don't know why. So right after 18 ended, and he said, if you want to know what we're planning for Halloween Horror Nights 19, let me just tell you, it's going to be classic, but not in the way you think. Now that immediately sparked speculation in the forums on Horror Night, HHN Vault, I should say. A young French-Canadian fan who called himself I don't know if it was French-Canadian, but a young Canadian fan, a teenager, back then, he's probably in his 20s by now, calling himself French Cowboy, started the speculation thread on the Vault right then in November, as early as, and amazingly enough, and this tells you probably why the Vault began to fail around in the coming years, but part of it was the moderators seemed to be overwhelmed by the increasing amount of membership at that time, and a lot of those moderators had own lives, and they really couldn't be bothered to do as much as they needed to, because they, how often are you going to be monitoring this thing? So they actually let the little bastard get away with it. Eventually he got banned for reasons, but I always thought he was entertaining. He was sort of rather scampish. I have no idea. He might have been a 48-year-old man. He might have been a woman. He might have been someone's pet cat. I have no idea, but French Cowboy was entertaining, and supposedly at that time was about 15, 16 years old, and thus he would have to be close to, that was 4 years ago, so he'd have to be getting close to his college age now. And whether he's still around under a different name, I've got no bloody idea. But he started the thread back then, and the first thing we all speculated from Classic was, of course, the Universal Classic Monsters. But what does it mean? Not what you expect, not the way you think. And the very first guess is, okay, some sort of updated, newfangled, or different version of the Universal Classic Monsters seems obvious. Well, of course, that was pretty much what Roddy meant. Actually, that was a very good guess. Absolutely. Absolutely. That wasn't the whole of it, though, but it was part of it, at least part of two houses, a couple of houses, and we all knew that an updated version of the Wolfman was coming out later that year. At that time, or in 2009, at least it was supposed to. Eventually, that was bumped into early 2010, but we didn't know that was going to happen yet. In fact, there was a big poster thing for the Wolfman in that near the that sort of curvular thing. I think it's Despicable Me or something now. Despicable Me 2 or something. It was hop for a while. But back then they had this big Wolfman advertising thing you could pose and take your picture with over by the horror makeup theater. So yeah, it's what, you know, and the fact that we just had Doomsday as a house, you know, it just seemed likely that the Wolfman would be a house in 2009. And maybe they'll update Dracula and Frankenstein and the Phantom of the Opera or the Mummy or somebody else. That's what we were thinking, what it was going to be. That was our guess from Roddy's Clue. It just made sense. Of course, I made fun of it and made funny jokes about, things like Greek mythology, which was meant to be a joke. But when I suggested, well, maybe he means classic, like classical, you know, classic actually can, the word classic technically in its original meaning is having to do with ancient Greece and ancient Rome. And so I said, well, maybe he's talking about classical mythology. Maybe what he's talking about then is a house set in Hades. And people said, that will never happen. Well, not for another year. So, like I said, I make a joke and it gets serious, whether I know it or not. That's happened to me more often to me than usual. I have a psychic sense of humor, I guess. If I think it's funny, it happens. That's like a curse. That'd be like an evil curse to put on someone. Anytime you think something's funny, it'll happen. I mean, that could be scary curse. That'd make a good movie. Yeah, the comedy curse or something. You know, so people getting pies in their face, and slipping on banana peels and getting killed. Anyway. But that was the first little clue given to us. But leaks started coming fast and furious that year. It was year of freaky leaks, as I said, from Roddy's first clue to Bill and Ted sneaking into a soundstage. Yeah, I'm not kidding. That was an official reveal clue, but there's all sorts of stuff going on in between. And the first happened when a young man named Jake, Jacob Metz, Jake Meister, as he was known back on the Vault in the day, went down to Hot Topic one day, and this would have been in the spring of 2009, before anybody really heard anything. He went to Hot Topic, and a Universal rep of some sort was there talking about merchandise and talking about tickets or Halloween Horror Nights or whatever it was that was going on, and happened to the Hot Topics person, or how to publicize it. The Hot Topics person said, oh, what's the theme going to be this year? And the rep just flat out said, oh yeah, it's going to be Saw, Chucky, and Wolfman. Which kind of gave away Chucky. Saw we actually already knew about, because there was another big thing. It just so happened that the people who make Saw horror movie, the Saw franchise from Lionsgate, the people who make Saw attractions for various theme parks and haunted events, there's a company that does that for Lionsgate, specifically for the Saw franchise. They just blurted out, oh yeah, we're going to do one at Universal Studios, both in Hollywood and in Orlando this year for Horror Nights. And they blurted that out quite early in the year. So we had the idea about classic, then we knew about Saw, and then, because Jake was paying attention that day in Hot Topic, it was verified. Saw, Wolfman, and Chucky. Oh God, that's going to be the theme. It's going to be some kind of horror movie, yeah. But then something else happened that gave it away in a big way, but only a small handful of people had this info. Somebody leaked a document. Somebody leaked an IP pyramid, as it's called. This is it. This was leaked. And in fact, I've done you a favor. I'm backwards. See, TE at Soy Dots Las Revenue. That's Universal Studios backwards. TE. But here we have I flipped the image for you, so you can see here this document. And I've shown it close so you can see it very clearly. This document was leaked. And I think I can go a little bit past 15 minutes. And as you can see, it actually gives this pyramid design, and it shows the IPs that had been acquired that year and how should they be used, plus other ideas. It has, for example, the presenting character, the usher. How will he be used is what it says. And then we have Chucky, Saw, Wolfman, and in the next tier we have Frankenstein, Dracula, and it's backwards and I can't even read it now, Silver Screams, and Fangoria Magazine. And then it has Bill and Ted and Rocky Horror on the bottom. So we knew Fangoria was going to be involved. We knew that in a way different from just the Fangoria radio that they'd had over the years. We knew that they were bringing back some new version of Dracula and Frankenstein, as we had guessed, with the classic, the Wolfman, Saw, and Chucky, and there will be an icon, a sort of ghoulish theater usher, and something called Silver Screams suggests more movie plots. In fact, the theme of the whole thing, ripped from the silver screen, was there written next to the usher. So we had all that information way back in the spring of 2009. A small number of us who were passing that around behind the scenes and sort of hinting at what we had seen, but we couldn't talk about it yet. And we didn't start talking about it until a little later on, when more reveal had been revealed. And it's now, I've pretty much finished this first video, so we'll continue with more of how it led up to how we learned about the event next time.